Niki, Radical Ninja, was an arcade game known in Japan as Kaiketsu Yancha Maru and developed and published by IREM, but was published outside Japan by Data East as Kid Niki, Radical Ninja. The difference between the original and the ports outside of Japan mainly revolves around Niki's hairstyle, where they went radical by giving him a wild, spiky mullet ponytail combination, which, you have to admit, is righteously radical. Kid Niki was followed by two Famicom sequels that never left Japan, Kaiketsu Yancha Maru 2 and 3. So, these are the three games we'll be looking at today. Let's see what's up. You can sum up Kid Niki, Radical Ninja rather succinctly by calling it a below-average action platformer. It's definitely not very radical. Outside of moving toward the right of the screen, jumping over obstacles, and attacking enemies with what the manual says is a spinning sword, what the cover shows as a regular sword, and what renders on screen as plastic blades from a household oscillating fan, there's not much else to it. The game spans 8 stages, with the first few offering very little challenge. Zombie-like goons amble towards you and bite the dust after one cycle of your spinning sword. Later stages add challenge by making enemies jump around less predictably, or requiring you to jump over deadly chasms while blocks sink into the water and seemingly harmless bubbles float up to kill you instantly. NES games love to kill you with bubbles. You can come across some alternative weapons to the spinning sword, however, your time with them is limited. They're good while they last. Enemies do satisfyingly fly off screen when dispatched. In the later stages, when enemy frequency increases, it becomes more important to get the rhythm of the spinning sword just right. There's a small delay between consecutive attacks, so being deliberate and anticipating the animation is essential. Niki's jump has no chill either. Whether you commit to a jump with a solid button press, or you merely tap it in the hope for just a little air, Niki's jump is very floaty. This makes crossing the bubbly river rather agitating when trying to time the bubbles and rising platforms. The floating jump also makes dodging enemies a bit of a hassle, as trying not to land right on them and take damage is tough. At least the bosses here are a little interesting. The first one is this big guy who chases you around trying to headbutt you, and there's a millipede that scurries around the screen that you have to knock the side meat off of. The weird thing is that after you attack any boss enemy, they knock your sword out of your hand and across the screen, making you retrieve it between hits. I guess this was their clever way of preventing you from simply spamming the boss to death. It's confusing the first time it happens and you're suddenly left fighting with just your fists like some kind of idiot. The stages vary a bit, but nothing too interesting until you plumb the insides of a sea creature and exit out its back end. There are ice caves, rivers, and mountains, but only one sea creature with a pipe for a butt. The story is a routine save the princess ordeal. Princess Margot is being held in the castle of the Stone Wizard, and it's up to Niki to save the day armed with nothing but a weird haircut and a makeshift weed whacker. Kid Niki's sequels did not originate in arcades, and as far as I know, were only released on the Famicom, which is a shame because both sequels are notably superior to the original we just reviewed. There is a pronounced upgrade and polish from the first to this follow-up titled Kaiketsu Yancha Maru 2, Karakuri Island. Both the graphics and the gameplay have been improved. Here, Yancha Maru is the main character, but I'm going to stick with Niki, if you don't mind. Niki's jumps are easier to control here. You can tap the jump button for small hops, meaning not every jump is a free throw line slam dunk, and you can be more precise. However, once in the air, Niki still has the tendency to fly only at an angle, resulting in some missed landings. Another notable difference, outside of the improved graphics and level design, is that now, thankfully, if you whack a boss with your spinning swords, you get to keep them in your hand this time. And as far as stage bosses go, you'll fight a demonic factory machine, a villainous train conductor, and a tree gone mad. The rest of the game's recipe is mostly the same as the first. It's a left-to-right action platforming beat-em-up, or spinning swords-em-up, if you will. The stages vary much more than they did in the original, with a number of different backgrounds and settings, like this level here, that I assume is just America. At the beginning of the level, you're chased down by a box of McDonald's French fries that's trying to stab you, probably with one of those overcooked potato shards you often find in the bottom. There's a rabid and biting hamburger bouncing around here as well. Later on, you'll find some Hershey bars half unwrapped and sticking up out of the ground. I'm only going to assume this product placement didn't acquire the right permissions and may be why we never saw this one in the US. You can use your weapon above you and below if you're jumping over enemies, something the first game could have used. And while these upgrades alone have made the sequel twice as good as the original, this one goes way above and beyond by giving you magic. If you pick up what I suspect are little baggies of magic powder, or maybe they're hot peppers, it's hard to say, but by consuming that little baggie of magic, for 10 brief seconds, Niki can transform into either an elephant that can't do much but doesn't go down easy, a frog that can jump to some hard-to-reach areas, and a bird that lets you fly over some large chasms. The bosses here are much easier than the ones from the first game, and I'll say I think the game overall is easier. You start with 3 lives and have infinite continues, and there are some checkpoints sprinkled in as well. You don't need to be able to read Japanese to play this Famicom game, but I also have no idea what the story is about. I'm going to bet a princess needs us though. All said, Kaiketsu Yancha Maru 2 Karakuri Island is superior to the original, and worth a shot if you have the means. But oh no, we're not done. IREM released Kaiketsu Yancha Maru 3 Taiketsu Sorenjin, I think, 2 years later in 1993, toward the tail end of the Famicom's relevance, and once again, this never left the Famicom nor Japan. And that's a shame, because IREM really did a good job making each of these sequels a little better than the last. I enjoyed the second game quite a bit, but the third really does a great job of making the experience feel complete. Gone are the animal transformations from the last, but now Niki has a dash attack reminiscent of Mega Man. It helps to slide through some hard-to-reach areas and dodge boss attacks. The level layouts are a little more complex here too, adding a little exploration into the mix. Niki must find the keys hidden around the levels to get through locked doors sprinkled all around. It's not quite a gated exploration game like Castlevania or Metroid, it's more linear than that, but it does add a wrinkle that the other games needed. As you can see, Niki's look has changed once again. Now he's rocking pigtails and swinging a bow staff. Using the bow staff, Niki can flip himself off walls to access hard-to-reach places. This is a little tricky to pull off, but does come in handy in certain situations. The levels and animations are much more refined here. Underwater levels let Niki swim around angry fish, skyward levels force Niki to cloud hop, and waterfall levels require Niki to frantically paddle a canoe against every ounce of physics known to mankind. The bosses in this one aren't as memorable, but once again you can see the Mega Man inspiration seep through from the enclosed battle rooms to even the way the energy for both of you and the boss are presented on screen. Your bow staff does shoot a projectile energy wave that allows you to keep some distance from enemies in this one, which is a nice shakeup from the 2 previous close combat games. It's not quite a shoot 'em up though. The DNA from the previous 2 entries are here in full force, so it doesn't feel completely out of place in the series. You don't need to know Japanese to have any success here, but you will probably lose track of the story, although let's just keep assuming it has to do with something about a princess. It always does. You start with 3 lives and infinite continues with some forgiving checkpoints along the way. Each game in the series is forgiving and only get better and better with each sequel. In the end, there's not a ton to say about Kid Niki Radical Ninja. It hardly stands out at all on a system full of better controlling and more interesting side-scrolling action platformers. The arcade original is basically the same thing, but with better sights and sounds. The Famicom sequels that never left Japan are good enough games in the Mega Man meets Mario vein that warrant some attention if you're starved for more games like that. It's too bad those never made their way to North America at the time. Well, that's going to do it. As always, don't let the bubbles touch you. Thanks for watching.